Another week of the Workplace Wanderer. I just want to thank everybody in advance for jumping on and joining us. As always, this is being recorded live on LinkedIn. We do this, I try to do it at least every week on Wednesdays at 11 a.m. Eastern Time. But in case you are not here for the live or you have to jump off early, if you're watching this live on LinkedIn, this will be posted as a podcast on all your favorite podcast platforms. I think we're going on episode 15 or 16 at this point, and we've had a lot of really deep, impressive people on that have just blown my mind in all the different areas that they discuss regarding workplace wellness, health, difficult conversations. I mean, every aspect of humanity in the workplace, and it's been a big goal of mine to really press that point that we need to start bringing humanity back to the workplace. And we almost somehow we forgot that these are human beings. They're not just a number. They're not just employees. So we've got to remember that. So I'm really excited for my guest this week, somebody who's been recommended to me a couple times and who I quietly follow on LinkedIn and watch and just am always impressed by. This week I have Cheryl Merriwether on. So Cheryl, thank you. Welcome.
Thank you for inviting me to spend some time with you today, Blake. I am so excited. And just based on your intro, it's like, oh my gosh, we are kindred spirits. I share your philosophy, your worldview. I'm so excited to be able to explore that even more in our time together here today. Thank you for inviting me to be here.
Thank you again for coming on. I love it. And I can already tell, like you said, we're kindred spirits, but you have such a kind, easygoing nature. And I can tell this is going to be a great conversation. You're very easy to talk to. So I'm excited. You're very warm.
Thank you.
So today's topic is substance use or misuse and employees. So I would love for you to start maybe by introducing yourself. And like I said, before we hopped on here, I always love people to introduce themselves in whatever way they feel is the most important and how it speaks to their truth. So feel free to introduce yourself and how it speaks to the topic and your truth. Who are you?
Awesome. Well, thank you again for the opportunity. I wear a number of different hats. We all have a story and a life journey that brings us to where we are today. And so I will kind of just give you a little peek into what that is and how I came to do the work that I do today. So my day job, I am the executive director and the vice president of an organization called ICARE. ICARE is the International Center for Addiction and Recovery Education. We are a Florida-based nonprofit organization that's been in business more than 25 years. We have a history of training clinical professionals in the addiction space and recovery support professionals in Florida, Georgia, other states around the country, and actually beyond Florida. We've, in our past 26 plus year journey, trained up to 40,000 clinical professionals from more than 40 nations around the world. So we're very proud of that. We've impacted nations. About 10 years ago, we started a second division, which is a coaching division, non-clinical. We train and certify professional recovery coaches, and we certify addiction awareness facilitators. So these are folks who, many of them have lived experience and they want to, give back. And some of them are solopreneurs. They're highly motivated, and they're starting their own coaching practices. So our programs have been very popular. We've trained coaches in more than 40 nations around the world. All of our programs are online. So it's very exciting for me to live in Central Florida, but through the work that I do, we are able to change lives and change families and workplaces, communities, and even nations. So that is very exciting. And it's at the same time, it's very humbling to know that I have the pleasure and the privilege of doing that. Some of our coaches, Blake, are professional people, high functioning. They've gone through their personal recovery journey, and they asked us to help them go back into the workplace and bring about a change in the culture in the workplace and a change in the conversation in the
Mm.
workplace around substance use disorder, around these very uncomfortable topics. And that was right up my alley because I wear another hat. I'm also an HR professional. So for more than 20 years, I have been involved as practicing HR professional. I've worked as an HR manager, director of training and development. I'm certified, got lots of letters behind my name for HR. I was last year and the year before the president of the Greater Orlando SHRM Society, one of the largest chapters in the state of Florida. I'm now the immediate past president. And for me, it was a dream, a dream of a lifetime to be able to bring together what the work that I do in substance use and misuse and recovery and bring that over into the workplace. And, I believe in destiny and fate. I also I'll share this with you, lived experience. I'm one of those people who knows a little bit about substance misuse, addiction, and recovery, and mental health issues, mental illness. My family of origin, I grew up in a household, an only child in Kentucky, but my mother struggled with mental health issues. Back in the day, they called it nervous breakdowns, but she would be hospitalized from time to time because of her mental health issues. And my father, though a very successful businessman, also was known as, one of the town drunks. So I have family of origin stuff that I spent a lifetime learning about and learning how to navigate my own life and how patterns can happen and occur subconsciously. And before you know it, those things you said I'll never do, you find that they are part of your life and you're carrying them with you. So
true.
It's been a journey of healing, a journey of exploration, a journey of learning to talk about things that everybody always said, we don't talk about those things out loud. But I have found, and other folks that have, completed on their own recovery journey, we find it very liberating. We find it very freeing to be able to say, let me tell you my story. And so not only do I now have the opportunity to share it with people like you, for whom I'm very grateful, but I also am now able to use some of that education that I got, the bachelor's, the master's, the certificate, the credential, all of that seems to come together for
it all converges.
So let's talk about it. That's one of my little hashtags. Let's talk about it.
Every episode, as somebody introduces themselves, I tell myself I should have a pen and paper in my hand because there's so many things that are said that I want to talk about. And you touched on so many different points, and I'm going to try to go from memory here. But one of the pieces that I heard you say about workplaces and as it relates to substance use is conversation and culture, the two C's. And that is a piece that I have focused on in workplaces and how the conversations we have influence the culture we live within. And that is such an important point to make. And you brought up also, though, that it's uncomfortable, that people don't like to talk about it and that it feels taboo and feels wrong. Yet it's also, in my experience, when we do talk about it, people seem to embrace it. And not to sound like a meathead here, but every time it's almost like going to the gym, right? It's the idea of going to the gym sounds awful for most people. It's like, I got to go there. I got to sweat. I got to lift heavy weights. I got to sit on that cardio machine for 40 minutes. But every time you're there and you complete it, you're so happy you did. And it's a lot of that same dynamic where the rewards of having these deep conversations that are maybe considered taboo at first, the rewards of having those conversations are so great and so fulfilling. It's just we have to work to overcome the fear of having them and what people may assume by doing so. So I love that you brought that up. the family of origin piece, and I think it's also another important piece for people to recognize how the family that we grew up, the family system that we grew up within, affects who we are as professionals, not just personal people, but who we are as professionals as we grow older. We develop these sort of coping mechanisms, right, as kids, to help deal with the unexpected of living in a household with addiction or mental health concerns.
Yep.
And we sort of develop these defense mechanisms that served us when we were children, but then no longer serve us as we transition into adulthood and develop healthier relationships. And suddenly we're still stuck with them, and we're bringing those issues with us to work.
Yeah. Those are called survival skills.
Mm-hmm.
For a child living in a household where things, and you don't know as a child whether this is normal or not normal, or, good or bad. You just you're there. And at some point you start to try to put the pieces together and you figure it out. But you mentioned the 2 C's. I'll mention a third and maybe even a fourth. So we also, in the work that we do, and particularly, Blake, in this post-COVID, post-pandemic, which still seems to hover around from time to time, we need to talk about the importance of connections. We've lost so many human connections along the way. And that is one of the seeds that, kind of grows substance misuse, addiction, and mental health issues. It comes from the loss of connection with real live people with whom we can reach out and touch and connect and share and receive support and help, and the things that we need to be nurtured, as human beings. So that is one. And specific to the workplace, I'll mention another C, and that's called covering. We talk a lot about diversity, equity, inclusion. I'm old enough to remember when it was just diversity, and then inclusion got added, and then somewhere along the way, equity showed up. And now we also talk about identity, and we talk about belonging. Hallelujah. I'm glad we're talking about belonging. But underneath that umbrella, we're really talking about people. And people, many of us, we're hiding in plain sight, if you will. And there's a term for that. It's called covering. There have been articles written and papers published and that sort of thing about it. But it's a real deal. You're surrounded by people in the workplace. Well, maybe not so much now because people are working remotely, but they're literally covered or hiding a part of themselves in plain view. So I'm here, you see me, but there's a lot of me that you don't see. And we don't share that because we don't feel safe, the psychological safety aspect. But if we're around friends or family or loved ones where we feel safe, then we can be open and we can be transparent. So the challenge and the opportunity, 2 sides of that coin, in my opinion, is to create a workplace culture where we can create that sense of, hey, there's another C, community, community and connections, so that people can reconnect and feel safe to, bring their whole self, be transparent, be, and ask for help. So much of the work that we do, people struggle in silence because they don't feel safe to ask for help. And particularly from the HR perspective, these are uncomfortable subjects and we don't know what to do. So we engage typically when there's been a critical incident in the workplace. Someone crashes a forklift, or they get out of control at a holiday party and do something inappropriate. And then it's all hands on deck to kind of correct that behavior, or deal with it. But, and I believe this to be true, the systems of care are so overwhelmed now with respect to treatment and the support for people from a clinical perspective. We've got to back this thing up and do more prevention. And a key element of prevention is awareness. And when we talk about awareness, we talk about sharing information, education, conversations. Let's talk about it. So that's really why I'm so grateful to you and the work that you're doing, because it really does take a village. And we're working together to try to help people understand the importance of creating those types of environments in the workplace, whether we're together in a physical building or working remotely, either all or part of the time. We still have to intentionally look for ways to reach out and connect with people. Oh, here's another C, and care. How about that?
I got
Not
another C for you too.
Oh, okay.
Well, it's sort of an overarching C of courage. I mean,
Uh,
it really takes courage for somebody to be willing to create this shift that we're discussing and to enact all the rest of the C's. It takes courage to start that process.
I'm going to add that one. Thank you. I love it. You're right.
I smell a book title for you here with somehow like the 7 C's or something like that.
Hey,
Right?
don't say
Yeah,
it.
yeah,
Somebody
sorry.
else
No
is
one can
saying
say
it
that.
first.
Luckily, no one. Luckily, I think we only have one listener ever to my podcast. So,
It's okay.
I'm just joking. I'm joking. So, yeah, I mean, you bring up so many important points, and it's really about challenging a broken system, is what I'm hearing you say. It's challenging an old way of doing things, not intentionally. I believe people thought that they were doing things right, and I think as a culture, another C. Oh no, we already brought that one up. That was our second one. As a culture, in terms of organizational health and just the way businesses operated for the longest time, it went from filling a need and wanting to help people, and then transitioned to a very like a capitalistic model of like how can we make as much money, and it became it by doing that, especially in the U.S. It really took the humanity out
Yeah.
of the workplace.
Oh, and don't forget compliance. See, I'm HR, and there's another C. While you're speaking, I'm thinking, oh, yeah. And we also began to kind of build walls to protect us from liability somewhere, somehow. We don't want to violate a law. We don't want to get in trouble. So compliance, but those things are rigid. To your point, where's the humanity? Where are the people in that? They kind of been pushed aside or covered.
Yeah, no, you're right, and it's I think as things became more capitalistic and more litigious, as you brought up, I think that really put people in a very small cage or a box where they
Yeah.
just felt they had to act a certain way when you're at work, and you do your job, you show up, and you check all your personal problems at the door,
Yeah.
and you can't be a human here. You're a robot that does a job.
Yeah.
And what I'm loving is there is a big shift, and especially because of COVID, I think that we're seeing this shift where that system is wildly broken, and it's not
Yeah.
working for people anymore, and people's
Well,
mental
yeah,
health are coming to the forefront.
all the reasons that you said, and it's also, and this is my opinion, I believe there's a generational shift. The older employees, I'll put myself in that category. We were just taught a certain way. And to
Yeah.
your point, I have had managers, I have worked with managers, and the old school way was keep personal out on that side of the door, don't bring it into the workplace. Wouldn't it have been wonderful to have left work at work, but that always managed to bleed to the other side of the door also. But those barriers, because that's what they really are, whether they're real physical barriers or more intangible, they're being dissolved, they're being poof, and now people do want to talk about things that they care about. And I do see it more so in younger workers, and it's a reflection because the workplace is a microcosm of society at large.
Yeah.
But we see that all around us now, where people are wanting and able. We have the tools now. We can express how we feel about things. And so, everything has a silver lining, two sides of the coin. It can be, everything that is good can be misused and, kind of cause problems. But the key is that we all realize we're in uncharted territory. We're going, if you're a Star Trek fan, old school like me, you're going where we've never gone before.
Yeah.
And it creates opportunity. It creates risk, yes, uncertainty, anxiety, stress, yes, reflected in the workplace through some of the mental health issues that are now off the chart, if you will. The distress. Blake, have you heard the term permacrisis? Have you heard that term? I
No.
used to talk about VUCA. VUCA is an acronym, stands for volatility, uncertainty, complexity, and ambiguity. So that term was originally coined by the military to describe the environmental factors that they encounter in war. I mean, you're in a war zone and it's volatile, it's uncertain, it's complex, it's ambiguous. So universities, business management programs started to use that term to help managers understand the nature of the workplace today, because the pace of change is so aggressive. It's very volatile, it's uncertain, that sort of thing. Well,
Yeah.
it's that word, I still share it with folks, but last year, I believe the HarperCollins dictionary people, they added a new word to their dictionary, and it's permacrisis. And it's a combination of permanent with crisis, but they put it together, and it is really very descriptive of the nature of the world in which we live today. It's like you look left, you look right, everywhere you look, it's like one crisis after another at the macro level, all the way down to the individual person and their lives. If not me today, could be me tomorrow, could be a family member, could be a friend, a coworker. So we really just have to develop some new skills to help people be more resilient, be more supported by those who care and who are in the environment with us, because it's like we're all in here in this boat together.
For sure.
And so that's, just
no, that's an interesting way to look at it. I'm thinking that, how we're sort of taught acceptance, right? It's a big part of people's personal growth journeys, especially in recovery, is acceptance, right? And part of acceptance is accepting change, that change is constant, right? That the only thing that we can always rely on to be constant, that never stops, is change.
Yep.
Sort of adding to that now, based on the permacrisis idea, is the only thing that's going to remain constant is crisis as well.
Isn't that terrible?
Yes, but by accepting it and understanding that we're always going to be in a state of crisis, it forces us to develop certain skills like resilience in order to function in this crisis. Well, to sort of adapt to the higher levels of stress, right? That we're dealing with. So it's pushing us towards almost like an emotional intelligence model.
Yes.
We have to develop emotional intelligence in order to deal with today's world,
Yes.
which is sad, but also might be the reality.
And that's where the opportunity comes from. I believe there's a symbol out there that has crisis on one side and opportunity on the other. And that's really the time in which we find ourselves. And, so it's, again, very exciting. I'll speak briefly to the workplace, the work that I do. I have been knocking on the door of HR world for a long time now, trying to talk about these things. And I, kind of share it in jest now, but I was selected to present at an HR conference maybe 5 years ago. And the title of my presentation was "The Cost of Doing Business in a High Society." I wanted to kind of connect,
well played,
substance misuse in the workplace and how it impacted a company's bottom line. I had two people come to my presentation. And so I set down the microphone and just started to sit and talk to these people. And one of the attendees said, "Oh, I thought this was something different." So out of the two that showed, one person really was interested in the topic. Well, fast forward to today, and it's a different story. We now have rooms full of people that are, and these are HR practitioners and others, health and wellness folks, professional coaches. We're kind of making the rounds with conferences this year, but it's the new hot topic, and people are desperate for solutions and for what can we do. And but it's interesting in that it's not just substance use or misuse anymore. It's more the behavioral health, because of dual diagnosis and comorbidity, those types of things, you can't really talk about mental health without talking about substance misuse. You can't talk
Right.
about substance misuse, addiction, and recovery topics without talking about mental health. So it really is a time for those of us who wear one hat or the other to come together
Yeah. So right.
and help one another fill the gaps, right? So the mental health folks may not be comfortable or know about, have not been trained fully about substance misuse. So we're coming together. I see in the work that I do, you know, at the organization level, health and wellness folks, mental health folks, HR folks, the clinical people, we're all coming together and supporting one another to share, you know, our best practices, our solutions. There's no competition. It's collaboration, some more C's, cooperation, strategic partnerships. That's very exciting. And you mentioned recovery ready workplaces. I am so excited about the recovery ready initiative, the recovery friendly initiatives. I talk a lot about both of those because they are different, but they are similar in many ways. They
Mhm.
overlap. And it's really a time where companies can say, well, it's like the menu. I like one from this
Yep.
selection over here and one from that. And so companies are able to customize a program or a series of initiatives, you know, incorporating into their planning, whether it's through the wellness programs, whether it's
Mhm.
through the diversity programs, whether it's under the HR health and safety initiatives, whether it's just, you know, we just want to do something to support our employees, 1/3 of whom may not drink. So let's bring
Yep.
in some non-alcoholic beverages to some of our company sponsored events. So
Yep.
it's just a fantastic time to let people know there are solutions. There is money and there's communities of practice exploring these things. Let's talk about it and help you find something that works for you to bring into your workplace to support your goals and your objectives. Let's do that together, and it's just an exciting time.
I mean, yes, it is, and I love that. And there's so much to unpack there. One thing, and this may sound ridiculous, but you're an HR professional, and I think a lot of people who aren't in HR don't have a deep understanding of exactly what HR does. I think a lot of people assume that HR is sort of just the person who makes sure that all your paperwork's in line and that your file looks good, just in case there's an incident. It's all about compliance, as you said. Could you shed some light on
Yeah.
the influence of HR and how HR impacts employee wellness or employee health and what they're really looking at?
Well, thank you. That's a great question. HR today is not what HR was 10 years ago, 20 years ago. It's not, you know, my parents' HR. It has evolved. Human resources is now human resource management. It is now a very strategic part of the business enterprise workplace environment. And it is very broad. It's a big umbrella under which there are many different functions, if you will. People are familiar with talent acquisition. They maybe have heard the term labor relations, employee relations. I mean, it's very broad there. So HR
Mhm.
practitioners can specialize in, I do talent acquisition, I hire people, I bring them on board, or they can specialize in labor relations or total rewards compensation, making sure people are paid fairly. Those are functional areas under the HR umbrella, but at the professional level, HR practitioners are strategic value added business partners now
Mhm.
that demonstrate a lot of business acumen. And we're looking at the workplace in terms of the strategic business imperatives and how can we utilize our talents, our knowledge, our experience to add value in such a way as to move the organization forward to accomplish their mission or their
Mhm.
vision or live out their values. So it's very holistic, it's very interdependent, and HR practitioners, many of us are certified for this very reason. We have to think strategy, we have to think business, what solutions, what systems, the organization is a system, what systems do we need to establish within the organization? And the organization at the end of the day is a collection of people
Yeah.
who bring their knowledge, their skills, their talents to bear, in an agreement. I will bring you my gifts, my talents in exchange for career development, a compensation and benefits, and other things that I value. So that's the mindset of an HR practitioner today. So when you're dealing with the most valuable asset of the organization or the enterprise, which are the people,
Yeah, the
you
talent.
have to create the environment, the organizational culture where they feel valued and appreciated and they are supported to bring their best self to the workplace to contribute. So it is a wellness issue and well-being. Wellness is now expanded beyond just the old traditional, these are the things we focus on under the wellness umbrella, but it's now human well-being, organizational well-being, and they overlap. You cannot have a well organization without having well people working in the organization. So everything that the HR people are doing now is with that worldview in mind. We have to create the system, the culture, the organization that supports this amazing group of talented individuals that we seek to attract, to retain, and to create an environment where they can be engaged at a very high level, where they can feel valued and appreciated and respected. They're engaged, where they're feeling that their needs are being met, not only their financial needs, but their emotional needs, their
Yeah.
relationship needs. That is the workplace today, and that is the role of the HR practitioner today, is to support that. And it's just, I'd say it's not your old-fashioned personnel department anymore.
Right.
It is a very strategic, value-added role that is responsible for navigating in this environment, VUCA, perma-crisis
Yep.
environment, but creating that workplace culture where people can contribute at their highest level and the organization can accomplish its goals. So it's a win-win. The
Yeah.
employees win, the company wins, all the other stakeholders that are a part of that universe also benefit from that.
It makes total sense. And, thinking about what you're saying, and I guess I'm sort of speaking to like the staunch, maybe rather emotionless business person here, but it sounds to me based on what you're saying that there's a really strong business case
Oh,
for
yes.
having a great HR department that's
Well,
versatile.
not only that, the business case has been quantified. There are very, really awesome C-suite leaders out there making the business case for an empathetic workplace culture now, and I'll name two. Johnny C. Taylor is the president and chief executive officer of the Society for Human Resource Management. He has been publicly making the business case for 4 or 5 years now, about the bottom line impact and need for an organization to create an empathetic workplace and culture, an environment where people actually care. It has been quantified. Another associate of mine is named Ajit Dodani. Ajit works in California. He's a former chief financial officer. He and his son, I believe, started a company called Empathify You, but his business is to train C-suite level executives about the bottom line ROI. He quantifies it through financial models of that same concept, the need to create an empathetic workplace culture. When you look at the fact that we say our people are our most valued asset,
Mhm.
if we cannot attract them, if we cannot retain them,
Retain, yep.
there's the revolving door in and out, the lost intellectual capital, right? The knowledge asset that people bring. It's not the land, the building, the equipment anymore. That's the wealth of the organizations. It's the intellectual capital that people bring with them when they come to work. If they leave, you lose that. So we need to retain these people and engage them so that they want to contribute and be creative and solution focused and all that comes with that. And so if you're not creating the proper culture and environment where people say, I need you to care, and you don't do that, there's no empathy there, it does have a direct bottom line impact. And that's the business case that is being made at the C-suite. And then the work that we do, yes, we speak to those issues to that audience, but we also speak to the grassroots. We speak to the people that are hiding within the organization, who have been in recovery. I have talked to people who say, I've been in recovery for 13 years. Nobody in my company knows. I don't talk about it.
Yeah.
And some of these people are director level people over very big have big responsibility in the company. They're value added people, but they have a part of themselves that nobody knows about because they've never felt safe to share it. So that there's so much opportunity to, as we break down some of these barriers and create some safety around these issues, because we need leaders who are willing to say, they're out there. They have family members who struggle with substance misuse or addiction or recovery. And the last thing I'll say, and I'll be quiet about this.
Oh, I love
Blake, it's a life or death issue nowadays. Absolutely. Because of what's out there with fentanyl, and not just me as an employee. Maybe I don't have a problem, but maybe I have children. Maybe I have grandchildren. Maybe I have nieces. Maybe I have nephews. The fentanyl is killing. Last year, more than 110,000 people died from overdose. About 70% of those were related to fentanyl. We have got to talk about these things in every opportunity that we have. Yeah. I know I said the last thing, but there was an HR conference in Orlando in January of this year. It was a mental health HR conference. That was the GoSher, my HR organization, put it on. We're going to do it again next year. One of the presenters was the head of an organization called Project Opioid. And he's on the front line trying to raise awareness about the opioid epidemic, the overdose, the fentanyl issue. There were 140 HR people in the room. He said, if you personally know someone who's died from an overdose, raise your hand. Like, this is a group of HR people. There must have been 35 or 40 hands that popped up around the room. I couldn't believe it. And then he said, stand up. Everybody that raised your hand, stand up. And they popped up all over the room, and you would not have believed it. These are HR people. I was in the group. I lost a fellow church member, 67-year-old grandfather, died from a fentanyl overdose.
Oh my gosh.
But real people know real people who've been affected, whose lives have been cut short, who've either suffered an overdose or passed away from an overdose. Yeah. And then he went around the room and said, what was their name? What was their name? What was their name? And out of everything that was done at that conference that day, based on the feedback we received from the participants, the most powerful session of the day, people said, was that session, because it opened their eyes to something that is around us, but no one connects to the fact that this is a personal thing, real live people that people I'm around have been affected by. They just see the numbers on TV and they keep going and they think it's not my problem. But that just was very eye-opening for me, because these were HR people and they had, so many of them had personally been affected by this problem. So we've got to talk about these things in the workplace.
And I hate to say there's silver lining to such a terrible epidemic, but there is a bit of silver lining to it, is that it unfortunately has affected so many more people that are in positions of power, to where now suddenly people are actually willing to talk about this, because the people who are important, quote unquote, even though everybody's important,
Yeah.
But there's certain people who are in positions of power who are being affected by this. And I would be willing to argue that there would be not a single person in that 140, the room of 140 people, who don't either know somebody directly or know somebody who knows somebody who's affected by just addiction in general.
Right.
And it's a very real topic, and it's a reality of the times that we live in.
Mm-hmm.
To go back for a second to some of what you're talking about in terms of the business case for improving culture and for having these conversations that embrace diversity and individuality, and that shifts workplaces more to cater a little bit more towards the what they call the followers, or towards the employees. There is, I mean, I've mentioned it before a number of times on this show, but so I started school about a month and a half ago, or I guess 5 weeks ago now. And I can't tell you, I mean, every week we're reading 600 pages worth of research articles, and they're all recent 10 years, which is insane, by the way.
Mm-hmm.
But most of the articles are making the business case for why it's important to take care of your employees, why it's important to create a sense of safety, what it does to the culture. Right. And ultimately what that does, if we zoom out, is if we can affect enough workplace cultures where people spend most of their lives is at work, if we can affect enough workplace cultures, we can start making a shift in the macro culture that we're living within.
Yep.
But there is such a strong case. And one of the things that came to mind was the concept of soft power versus hard power. And so there's been a transition in recent years towards where the soft power has taken the lead of what's most attractive for organizations. Hard power being the idea that we're the biggest, the baddest, we control the most market, to where now soft power is what people are looking for. They're more attracted to an organization that embraces individual differences, that embraces a healthy culture. And that's what people want to go work for now.
That's right.
They want to be involved in an organization, and it makes it more attractive in not just hiring, but also retaining, as you said, employees. They feel like they're a part of something, a part of a bigger movement with a mission.
Yeah, you bet.
Values.
Yes, sir. You nailed it. That's it. And because there is now so much data, if you will, and the studies, the evidence, if you're, evidence-based outcomes, it's there. You cannot deny it. You can quantify it. But it's like what's missing is the connection to the practical, right? What do you do with that? Most people aren't buried in that. I am, because I'm an educator. Sure. And I'm trying to build a business case and persuade people. And they ask the question, what's the evidence behind this? Do you have evidence-based data study out? Yes. But to change, in my opinion, just my opinion, you got to touch the heart. And that's why I have found, and I did not always tell my story. I could go back decades and say I was one of the people hiding. Very few people knew some of the things I was dealing with along the way. But when you find an individual who is willing to put a human face, not just an avatar, but a me, myself, and I story behind it, it's very powerful in terms of breaking down barriers. It puts a human face on these things. And that's why, to your point, how do we engage leaders around these issues? Yes, we need the support of the business case to say, the numbers speak for themselves, but also we need people who are courageous. I love the courage C there, to say me too. And we've seen it in other areas, the power of the Me Too movement, if you will. Sure. One person standing up and said, let me tell you what happened to me. And others say, me too, it happened to me. It's like, wow, then, things go viral. It breaks the barriers down, the floodgates open, and there we go. So that's what we're trying to do. It really does, people have different worldviews. You look at diversity, and some folks see it this way and don't have like that and all of that. But it's like there's these values, these core values and principles that we can agree on. The tactics, the approaches that people use to make a difference can vary. We see some companies supporting these initiatives through affinity groups. I mentioned, diversity, equity, and inclusion. One of our graduates is a very high-level employee at Oracle. She is a person in recovery. She started taking some of our programs because she wanted to learn more about substance use disorder. She became a certified professional recovery coach. But then she went into her company and they were saying, let's form some affinity groups, or let's do some new things under the wellness programs. And she asked for permission to start a group through the wellness network that would talk about, health and wellness, but with more of an emphasis on substance misuse and addiction. And it grew. I mean, almost within a couple of weeks, she had 400 people that joined the group that she now holds regularly. Then the insurance company heard about it and they hired her to begin to do webinars or, lunch and learns online through their insurance network. One of our individual, I wrote an article about this thing. A gentleman is going through our programs now. He's at Wayfair, and he said, they asked us to create affinity groups. And I looked around, I've been in recovery for 13 years and there's nothing here for me. He said, so I want to learn how to start an affinity group around to support employees like me in recovery. So I connected him with Marin Nelson. Marin Nelson is a former vice president at Salesforce, big CRM tech company, formed an affinity group for employees in recovery. Marin was one of the founding employees for that. They formed Sober Force, an affinity group. So the Wayfair individual connected with Marin at Salesforce, connected with our student at Oracle. They now have a group inside of Wayfair. So the bigger companies do this. They get permission. We're going to do it through the diversity umbrella. We're going to do it through the HR. We get permission from HR, the wellness folks, the communications folks. Because if you do something like that inside the company, other stakeholders want to know what's going on in the company, what's happening. But it's happening. They're doing it. And not just big companies, Blake. We have trained in Central Florida through a partnership. I mentioned Project Opioid. Our local workforce boards called Career Source Central Florida, Career Source workforce boards around the state, around the nation. They obtained funding to provide training in the workplace to HR practitioners because of the opioid epidemic. They wanted to train the HR practitioners how to administer Narcan in case of emergency. If an employee on the front line suffered from an overdose, they wanted HR to be able to come to the rescue before the EMTs got there and administered Narcan. Well, based on a focus group with the local SHRM chapter, Go SHRM, we realized you can't go in and get an HR person to administer Narcan when they don't even know that they have a problem, an opioid problem in the workplace, not happening. So we took our facilitator training, we expanded it with 6 hours of HR training. We've now trained with the funding that came through the grants that the Career Source and Project Opioid obtained. We've trained somewhere in the neighborhood of 200 HR practitioners, not only through the Career Source Central Florida grant, but Career Source Suncoast sent 15 HR people through the program. The U.S. Department of Labor is looking at it to see if they can get behind it to spread it nationwide. But when you're talking about the workplace, if you're going to talk about opioids, you've got to talk about alcohol. You've got to talk about marijuana and cannabis. You've got to talk about all substances and mental health issues and provide them skills training so that they know how to break the silence and create the safety and change the culture. And in doing that, we help them create plans so that they can sustain these initiatives long term. It cannot be the flavor of the month.
Nope.
We did it here today, gone tomorrow. We're looking at systemic, organizational, cultural change. And it begins with training HR practitioners how to create sober curious, recovery ready, recovery friendly, drug free workplaces. They have some elements of these things already that they're aware of. Maybe they've heard of Sober September or Dry January, but they can capitalize upon other things. They can connect with resources in the community. They can find employees within the workplace who want to help. If no one's comfortable going to HR about these things, but if we have other peers, the NAMI people, I know you're involved with NAMI, so are we, but NAMI people, they're there. They're
Yeah.
peers in the workplace who can help the HR people introduce programs and maintain them and sustain them long term. So
Yeah.
again, that's why I get excited about these things, to share the news so that people can say, I want to know more about that. We need someone in our organization to be trained in how to lead these initiatives, because we do recognize the human impact and the organizational impact and the benefits that
Yes.
can come from these types of initiatives.
Yeah, I mean, so well said. I could sit and listen to you talk about this all day. It's exciting. And you know what? This may be ridiculous, but what I'm pulling from what you're saying actually is how, in a sense, how simple it actually is to start these changes, almost just through inquiry alone,
It
just
doesn't
asking
cost
some
money.
questions. Yeah, it just
It
really,
doesn't cost a lot of money, Blake.
it's asking some questions and just raising a topic is enough to start a change process and empowering a few individuals at work and just being courageous, as we talked about before, enough to start the process. It reminds me of that story that people talk about where I'll never remember the name, and this is terrible because I'm telling a story, but the man who broke the record of running a 4-minute mile. And before breaking that record, everybody thought it was impossible. As soon as he broke the record, hundreds of thousands of people have now done it because they realized it was possible. It's sort of the same idea here, where it just really takes one person to say, hey, this is okay. Let's talk about this. And suddenly everybody will get on board and start joining the conversation.
Yes, sir. That's the good news. That is the good news. People feel like they're alone because no one talks about this. But it's like the conference, one person asked one question: how many of you know someone? 40 hands popped up around the room. People stood up and began to name names, and people were amazed. It's like, wow, I'm not the only one. You mean, and that is what the culture change can do. But again, it should be, as with all things HR now, strategic, intentional. There should be a plan. There should be all of the metrics. We do an analysis. We have created, our organization, ICARE, has created a customized health risk assessment. We call it the Healthy Self Checkup, because you can't go in and say, I've got a health risk assessment that focuses on mental health and substance use disorder exclusively. But we created it in partnership with an organization, Global Health Metrics, and all they do are health risk assessments. But we created this one. It's customized based on Francesca and DiClemente's stages of change. I know you're familiar with that. But it's 3 mental health categories and 2 under the substance use misuse categories, the whole thing. And we use it. We invite companies to introduce this. It's very low cost, almost insignificant, but send it out. You're in open enrollment season. Send out the Healthy Self Checkup And the individuals get valuable information about where they are on that stages of change continuum. I'm contemplative, I'm thinking about it, I'm ready to take action around these issues. But the organization gets a macro level report. This is a snapshot of your company. 15% of your employees are pre-contemplative. 20% are contemplative. They're really thinking about making a change in their lives. And, 15% are ready to take action, but we use that as a tool to consult with the HR folks and say, look at where your organization is. We can bring in some programs. We can bring in some things. We can share some videos. We can do some lunch and learns. We can do some things in partnership with you to, begin to move things forward a little bit, create some safety and do some things. And then we roll around later and we introduce that same healthy self checkup again. And you've got quantifiable data, like an assessment on the front end, and then you do some things and then you take it again, and you should see some movement in the organization in terms of moving the entire organization toward a more recovery ready or recovery friendly workplace culture. These things become embedded in the organization. So we've done this very intentionally over time with a lot of feedback from professionals who do this. Again, we see ourselves as a bit of a bridge, bringing together the best practices from the clinical addiction world. We bring those specialties into bear. We bring in the best practices from the coaching world. We bring in the best practices from the HR world. We bring in the best practices from the health and wellness folks. We bring them together into programs that can be introduced into an organizational setting for organizations who want to create, these things in-house and have people on their team internally trained and certified, credentialed to lead these initiatives. Yes, it can be an HR practitioner. It could be a safety person. It could be just a leader it could be a union steward. It could be anyone in the company who cares about these things enough to say, I want to be part of the solution, so that those of us who are here may be hiding, may be suffering in silence. If they crash and burn, there's not enough treatment out there. 1 in 10 people, something like only 1 in 10 that actually need treatment actually get it. I know you know this, but we've got to back it up and do more awareness, more prevention. And the best way to do that is through connecting people with other people so that they can access the help, the resources that they need. There's nothing like a person with lived experience that can say, let me tell you what worked for me. Let me tell you, here's a number you can call. Here's a book you can read. Here's a group you can join online, in the community, whatever. But it's the people who are able to bring to bear solutions. And you nailed it. Most of these things cost little or nothing, but an investment in an intentional desire to help hurting people with creative solutions. So that's why I'm glad you brought me here to talk about these things.
You are a powerhouse. The people who you're working with are powerhouses. It sounds like you are doing some incredible, incredible work. And obviously we recognize that everybody who's working within, honestly, any position at this point is feeling burnt out, exhausted, tired, and that it seems hard to imagine adding something else to your day-to-day life. But it seems like the services that you guys are offering really make it easy for people, and it provides them a roadmap to how to do this and how to implement these changes in their workplace. So I suggest anybody who's looking to be a part of this very important movement and create a healthier culture at the work, they reach out to you.
Yes.
I think it would strongly behoove them to do so.
Thank you. Yeah, I connect people with other people. That's in my personal life. You asked me about my little journey when I started. I gave you just a snippet of it. But it really has brought all things together for such a time as this.
Mm.
And I see myself as a connector. I met you through a connector,
Yep.
a friend of mine who connects people who she thought would be good. I'll shout her out, Ashley Grimes, president of Florida NAMI. She
She's
connected
our
me.
first guest on the Workplace Wanderer.
Yeah,
Guest number one.
she connected me with you, and I see that as part of my life's mission and purpose is to connect people together. And it's like the hub in the middle of the wheel, or the
Yep.
Venn diagram. It's the part where they overlap. That's really where I am. I see health and wellness. I see HR. I see coaching. I see substance use, misuse, the clinical world. And there's so much opportunity for them to collaborate and to work together. And there are probably millions of other people like me who can sit in the middle and look around once they've had a little training and support from organizations like ours who continue to build them up with resources and information so they can know one-stop shopping. I go here to get questions answered and resources. I go to ICARE. ICARE can help me with that. But then they take that and they go back. The self-employed solopreneurs, they say, I can do this. I write about it, blog about it, talk about it, build my business, my practice with some of these resources because that was a gap. I have all this other stuff, but I didn't know about this thing called substance misuse, addiction and recovery, and how that connects. So it's the connection. Connection. So it's my pleasure to be here with you, to share these things with you. I hope we can stay connected. I look forward to connecting with others that you can connect me with, and we're going to change the world. If we do it one person at a time, Blake, we impact a family, we impact a workplace, we impact a community, we impact nations. I mentioned that in my opening, but it's the ripple effect on the pond. The ripple goes on and on. The starfish story, there's thousands on the beach, but made a difference for that one. We really just want to make a difference, one person, family, workplace at a time. And that's what I'm glad to have the opportunity to try to do with your help today. Thank you so much.
No, I think you've enlightened all of us. So thank you so much for coming on here. And I appreciate you taking time out of your busy schedule. So if people want to go find out more about ICARE, is there a website they can go to?
They can. It's ICARE-aware.com. ICARE-aware.com. Or you can find me on LinkedIn, Cheryl Brown Merriwether. And I have a great team of people that work with me. So I will get back in touch, or someone else on my behalf will get back in touch and answer questions and provide support. And that's what we do. And we're very honored and grateful and considered a pleasure and a privilege to be able to do this work.
I love it. You are a powerhouse, as I said before, and you're a beautiful soul. Thank you so much for your time today, and appreciate all the information you've given us. So thank you, everybody, for watching. If you've made it this far, I do want to shout out to Dr. I'm going to butcher your name, and I'm very sorry in advance, Dr. Funmi Agocha. She said, great conversation on workplace substance use and misuse. Amanda Marino, who I work with at Next Level, said workplace training is so important. Thank you for this discussion. So thank you guys for chiming in. And thank you, everybody. If you missed the conversation, you're just catching the end, don't worry. It's going to live on my page forever. And it'll also live on all the different podcast platforms soon enough. So thank you again, and have a great day, everyone.